Alright everyone, there are planned armed protests at every state capital starting, if I remember correctly, on the 16th and or 17th and proceeding through the 20th. So we start off today with my analysis of that. Number one, my expectations of what will happen. Number two, what I think about the whole concept from the get-go. Now first and foremost, there will be 4 links if you're watching on YouTube in the description, as well as a pinned comment on the YouTube comments area where you can join me on other video sites that don't algorithmically demote people. This channel started to grow again thanks to the efforts of clankers, I think, sharing things out, but it's sluggish, whereas on BitChute, where I make exclusive content, I'm getting up towards 130,000 subscribers. That's quite something. The view counts have definitely risen over the last over the last 5 days, and I can't conceive of why that would happen. But here's my thoughts. Number one, I unequivocally support the right of free assembly. I unequivocally support the right of citizens to protest peacefully and lawfully. I support people's right to carry firearms. I'm pro-gun. This makes me, by the way, according to some people, a far-right extremist, because I think people should be capable of effectively defending themselves. It's very funny. I don't want you to be stolen from, I don't want you to be silenced, and I don't want you to be randomly killed by terrorists or something. I'm the bad guy, according to the MSM. They're very patriotic people. Anyway, I would say this. The odds of all 50 of these protests remaining peaceful, you're going to get leftist provocateurs. You're going to get glowing one provocateurs, feds, and so forth there. It's potentially a powder keg situation, and the odds that all 50 protests, plus DC, I think, will go off without a hitch and be entirely peaceful, I think is close to 0. The problem is if you get bomb-throwing leftists and a bunch of plate carrier militiamen in one area with cops that by and large will be probably outgunned, certainly outnumbered potentially by the crowds in many of these cities. The problem becomes, even if only one of those protests becomes extremely violent, and it definitely could devolve into a shooting match, it becomes a major event. It would be bigger than the Capitol event. You could see people get killed by the National Guard. You'd see like a Kent State sort of thing. Now, what will the MSM do? Here, keep this in mind. For all of you who are like, you're populistic, you support Trump, or you don't like the censorship going on, the left is doing, by the way, exactly what I expected. They have completely overstretched. Please trust me, there are plenty of people out there who are turned off at this point by Trump, but ultimately will be marching anyway, because the alternative they feel is worse. I happen to largely agree with them. I think that multi-billionaires controlling every aspect of your life is worse than having a person in there who uses strong language on tweets sometimes. Here's what I would say, though. Keep in mind that we've seen over the last few years a massive differential open up between how people are treated based on their political persuasion. If you have a MAGA hat on, and you're being chased around by an AK-47 wielding communist, if they blow your head off, you are forgotten. The news will not talk about you. There will be no kneeling. There will be no accountability. The person will probably get caught and released by the local DA. If you blow them away successfully, because they're trying to kill you, you'll be called a terrorist and a criminal. And at the very least, even if it's cut and dry self-defense, as we've seen in multiple cases, they will insinuate that it's still your fault just for having been there in the first place. Well, why were they armed anyway? Well, we don't want these MAGA types around here. You sound a lot like segregationists, by the way, people in the MSM, when you say this. It's funny, Geraldo Rivera, by the way, throwing Trump under the bus. He's like, well, maybe he obviously has some sort of mental dysfunction that I wasn't aware of, so I'm apologetic for it. It's like, Geraldo, you've made a career out of flip-flopping and doing stupid shit. And he keeps getting ratioed, like, on Twitter of all places, he gets ratioed when shitposting. What the hell is wrong with you, dude? He's trying to maintain relevance. A massively wealthy dude. He's an interesting guy if you look at his life. Look at the Satanic Panic. Anyway, keep in mind that situation. There won't be a holographic memorial to you. The ACLU will not aid your family in suing the person who shot you. There won't be any justice or peace for people that don't have left-wing views. Now, if a person has a BLM flag shirt, they're immune to all criticism. You're automatically evil if you do anything. And remember, Antifa is just an idea that throws bombs. This is why we see a situation where these fucking pathetic leftists, they were trying to make a meme on Twitter, which has already, as I predicted, devolved basically into an echo chamber. It basically has become completely fucking useless. They're trying to openly antagonize people like me back onto the platform, but they had like a meme, and it was screen grabs of two of my videos. The first talking about Ashley Babbitt, the second Jacob Blake, and the idea is that I'm a hypocrite because I have no problem with the cops in the Blake case getting off scot-free, not being charged, but I'm calling for justice in the Babbitt case. When you point out to these people that Babbitt was an unarmed individual engaged only in non-violent crime when she was shot, and Jacob Blake had already assaulted officers and was going for a deadly weapon while out on warrant for a violent felony, the cognitive dissonance kicks in, and of course then they say, well, you're butthurt for even responding. It's interesting how the mental midgets of society work. They also think that it'll get me to start tweeting. Fat chance, dude. There's no reason to. It hasn't had any... The only thing I care about, really, about content creation are my videos and my books. Twitter was just a notification machine anyway that I happened to shitpost on because the leftists are so cringy. As far as these protests, though, my hope is they remain peaceful, but there are militias that at this point appear to want to take things further. Leftists are calling openly for violence. You've got members of Congress, Cory Bush, that one goofy in Congress, oh, we can't have unity with these people. We need to stop them, essentially calling for violence against Trump fans. There will probably be liberal counter-protesters there too. There will probably be conservative counter-protesters. This could get bad. And by the way, keep in mind there's a difference between the state capitals. Some of them are run lock, stock, and barrel by blue state politics, and others are in place in states where the state guard is controlled by, a Trump-loving Republican. I would expect a less likelihood of all-out chaos happening in a smaller, like in Vermont. I don't expect there to be violence in Vermont. Very, very blue state. The crowd will probably be quite a bit smaller, number one. Number two, Vermonters, we don't really do the violence thing. Or a place like Florida, where the Republicans there will goddamn make sure that things are locked down appropriately. There's a pro-Trump sentiment in certain states. But then you get a state like Illinois. What do you think is going to happen at their capital? What do you think about California? Some of these states that are run largely by a one-party process of Democrats that right now are endeavoring to essentially overthrow a chunk of the U.S. government. The funny part is the projection is palpable. You would say, well, these Trump fans are so violent, and yet they're planning peaceful protests. When the left shows up, they immediately start throwing rocks and burning Wendy's. That happened for months and months. The MSM apologized for them, literally condoned it, and was more than just tolerant. Said, well, we need to have a national conversation about what these people are pissed about. Instead, what you see right now is no one's trying to have a national conversation about why there was a Capitol riot. Why is it that people are planning armed protests in every state capital? Why is it that these people are murmuring about insurrection on forums, and some of them don't even glow in the dark at this point? Why are they so pissed? Could it be because the system that has literally heaped verbal abuse on them for years and years and they feel doesn't represent them is literally proving their point by attempting to crack down on every possible avenue for them to speak instead of shoot? If you silence them completely, what you do is you either create a fanatic echo chamber, which is dangerous, or you create a shooting situation, which is deadly. I would be surprised if all of these protests remain peaceful. That's the problem. And when violence happens, it'll be lost. Trust me, the most likely scenario is that a leftist shows up and shoots somebody and all-out chaos erupts, and the MSM immediately says, well, the Trump fans started opening fire on the police. That's probably what will happen. It will be used as propaganda. Days later, of course, independent commentators actually analyzing the full footage and the full course of events will say, look, that's not what happened. This is, by the way, the case with Trump supposedly stoking up a coup at the Capitol. That never happened. It wasn't a terrorist event, it was a riot. It was the same as the rioting we've seen in 50,000 U.S. cities over the course of the last months, but the MSM wants to call it an insurrection of a few thousand people. Or the Covington kids. The MSM spent the first 48 hours proclaiming that they approached Native American marchers and started mocking them for racial reasons. That's a total 180 from reality. The legal system has recognized this in the form of multiple settlements for Nick Sandmann. Oddly enough, represented by Lin Wood, who has been deplatformed across the mainline internet and apparently gone completely apeshit. He's gone crazy. He's spewing out weird shit on a regular basis now on multiple alt-tech sites. The dude, I am afraid that Lin Wood may have had a psychotic break. I'm actually afraid that he might have, because he persists in his bizarre statements, as opposed to telling people, hey, by the way, your First Amendment rights are being hazarded. Let's do something about it. No, let's LARP. Let's keep LARPing for the rest of time. Lin Wood, it'll be 2022 and the dude will still be talking about like space aliens saving us all while our capitals burn to the ground because of communists. And that's the other thing. The most likely groups, militias are well trained. A lot of these dudes are ex-military. They know trigger discipline. They're keeping their weapons aimed down. They're not going to fuck with the cops. Half of them are still thin blue liners. They're not going to randomly start attacking buildings and shooting people unless they are sorely provoked. Well, that provocation, unfortunately, can come from leftists who like to do it anyway on a normal day. But you keep in mind what'll happen is that one dude from Antifa goes in, throws a Molotov, and then runs away. Then they goddamn scatter and let everyone else take care of the repercussions. That's probably what'll happen. And then you'll have a bunch of cuck Republicans, number one, and a bunch of Democrats coming out and acting as though the official version of events has any veracity. This will probably be used for propaganda. Under the best of circumstances, you'll only see some violence at a couple of capitals. That's unfortunately what I think is probably going to be the case. If you go to one of these armed protests, you have to understand you are technically taking your life in your hands. Should you be able to stand there? Yes. Should you be able to be armed while standing there? Yes. Are you protected explicitly by the U.S. Constitution in doing so? Absolutely. Does that mean that there aren't repercussions in the form of an entire establishment that is hell-bent to destroy you? Of course, they're going to use any possible excuse they can to do so. Yeah, so keep in mind that the dude handing out the Molotovs probably glows at night. That's about all. Peace out.